Hey guys, welcome to the first strategy video on our new English or international channel. As always, we are going to present a strategy today, and we're not going to do it alone. No, we're going to invite a very strong player today, a very experienced player also, 𝐁𝐨𝐽𝐬.
Hello, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really pleasure
Yeah.
to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. I mean, you're top 20 right now, and we are, so top 20 players, and we are very thrilled to do a strategy video with you. You're presenting a Dutch strategy today. Can you give us any more insight on that?
Yeah, so a couple games we're going to go over, and basically the idea with Dutch is to try to get an economic advantage and get as many banks as you can up safely without putting yourself at too much risk. So this game, I think I get up to 4 banks pretty quickly, and that's usually a good spot to try to aim for, because 5 banks is a little bit sometimes too risky, and 3 is sometimes not enough to match or surpass your opponent's economy.
Okay, yeah, cool. So thanks for that. And as you already said, we're going over through 2 replays together, and then we will do a rundown of the whole strategy in more detail with the deck and everything. So the first match started now. Is Dutch, and you're playing against Ottoman.
Yeah, so this matchup is, I think, one of the more difficult, and you have to scout very well to make sure you know what they're doing, because it can be tough to defend both their fast fortress or their rush. So you want to be active on the map and kind of know around like 3 minutes when they're going to be aging up, a little bit after that, seeing what age of politician they use and reacting towards that.
Right, that makes sense. So already starting the first treasure down here.
Yeah, so when you're able to grab a nice wood treasure early, that really like opens up your possibilities for H1. Like if you want to go market, it makes that much more viable, and without like delaying anything. And you're able to get hunting dogs very early, and you don't miss out on the 100 wood that you typically would have towards getting your first bank in transition. So that's a really good treasure for Dutch.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you did so far was you gathered all your crates, including the wood crates. You built a market, researched hunting dogs, and I think you also gathered a bit of wood in order to get up to 100 wood for your first house. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I didn't have to gather too much wood because of that treasure.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, yeah, typically what I like doing is a 15 population age up, or 15 villager age up. So you gather the coin to make up to 12, and then the 3 from the shipment will get you at 15, and then you can get up at a pretty early time and be set up where it's, if you age any sooner, you're probably gonna have idle idle TC time, and you probably will have a tough time getting the bank up before you hit H2.
So right now
Okay,
the first shipment is already incoming. Let's just have a look for a second at the deck. So what we see here is basically the 3 resource crates in the second age, bank wagon, specific to Dutch, of course.
Mm-hmm. And those are like the 4 main shipments for Dutch that you basically want to have in every deck, because it gives you options to have 600 wood. Because if you want to go 5 banks, you can go 700 wood and then 600 wood. And if you're going to do 4 banks, typically the build is 700 wood and then bank wagon.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you also found another. Sorry.
I just wanted to say we'll see how this turns out, but yeah.
So, but you already found another food treasure, and you're actually also starting another wood treasure right now, which is really good for Dutch.
Yeah,
very convenient.
Mm-hmm. That just makes the first bank in transition come that much quicker, and so that, exactly like you said, it's so important for Dutch.
Yeah,
it's not necessary, but it's a big boost. It's like, I mean, not half a bank, but it's like at least a quarter of a bank that I've already found in treasures.
Yeah, right. That's pretty cool. Okay, so now you got the 15 villages, you moved everybody away from coin, started gathering wood for your first bank in transition, and you're also aging up with the quartermaster. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, you always, well, not always. If you want to try things differently, you can do different age of politicians, but generally you want to go with the 400 wood because it offers so much in terms of you can build a whole bank and wood value off of it, or you can build a military building and a couple houses. And then, yeah, in transition, you want to switch to wood and food. And the rule that I've been going by is usually either 6 on food, 9 on wood, or of course, depending on your treasures, if you got a wood treasure, then maybe you're already closer to the 350 on wood, so maybe just more on food. But yeah, you get to the 350, drop down your bank, and then switch a bunch of villagers to coin to make sure you'll have 100 coin to queue your vill on age-up.
Right,
Okay.
so the villagers for Dutch cost coin, of course, if that hasn't been made clear here. But that's why you're collecting coin now to queue the next villager. And the bank is 350 food and wood. So that's what you aim for. Yeah.
Also, you're always building the first bank with 3 villages, I noticed. Is that like a preference thing, or would you say that is, well, a thing you should do in general?
I believe the case is like with wonders in the game. Typically, if you do 4 villagers, it's the most efficient, and then they all build at the same rate. They all add the same amount of build, like they subtract the same amount of seconds from the building. Then if you go like 5 to 8, which 8 is usually the max, they reduce the time that it takes to be built, but not the same rate than the first 4 villagers. So if you guys understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah, of course. So the efficiency of like every villager added goes down after the...
Yeah. So you can... So 4 would be efficient, and 3 would be efficient as well. But I think sometimes I just choose to do 3 because I don't know. Maybe it's preference again. You can do either.
Yep.
Okay. So
maybe you want to give us some insights on like well, you spotting intel and what you made out of that, or made of that.
I think I just pause the game here for a second because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. So okay. If you noticed a minute or so back, my envoy was walking through his base, and the reason I was doing that is that you want to try to time this pretty well around when they age up, to make sure you see what crates they have on the floor by their TC, and you want to do that, pretty soon after they age up, so they don't gather those up, and then you don't know what happened. So I was over there and I saw the 400 wood on the floor. And that tells me, because the main concern that I have, and most trouble I have against Ottoman and Spain, is the tower age up and the early age 3 push with cannons. So I noticed that he didn't age up with the tower, and that means he's either doing a bunch of trade posts, either going water, or he's going to rush me in some type of way. So then I moved my envoy straight towards the middle of the map, and I did scout that barracks, which then, obviously signal that he's going to make some military, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do to defend this. And then also with my explorer, checking the TP line to see, is he just going to make some Janissaries and defend the TPs, or is he is he focusing on TP production, or is he maybe going to add another military building and put on some pressure?
Right.
So you can kind of like understand those things based on how many trade posts he's going to make.
So he has built a second one. What you also did with the 400 wood that you get from the age-up with the quartermaster, you already built your second bank as well.
Right. So once you get enough coin to queue that first vill, you can switch a lot of those villagers off of coin back onto food, and you don't have to put anybody on wood yet because you got the 400 wood from the age up, so you can just collect that with like 1 or 2 villagers, and then gather that 350 food and drop that second bank. And then I sent 700 wood as my first shipment, and that's usually a good first shipment because it gives you some flexibility. You can, and there's a couple things here. Like if I scouted his bank or his barracks earlier, I could have made a barracks off of the 400 wood and a couple houses, and then shipped the bank wagon. It depends how much pressure you feel like you're going to be under, and how soon you want to get like some military units. So here, the pressure is still not here. It could be. Sometimes it is if he's really rushing like hard. But I'm still safe to make a barracks off of the 700 wood and a third bank and send the fourth bank with the bank wagon. So this is a pretty good situation. It's kind of greedy against Ottoman rush, but
So that's
now
what we see here.
yeah, so I got my third bank built, which is good because if you get stuck and not finishing that while he's pushing in, that can be a problem. So
yeah. So the thing is, he didn't age up with a tower, so you were pretty sure that he's not sending the Janissaries from his home city, or at least he might be sending them, but they won't be as fast, right? Because he can't just receive them at his forward base, and that gave you some security, I reckon.
yeah, and also it gave me some comfort not knowing that I wasn't going to have to face falconets or find a way to deal with falconets really early in the game. So that way I can build banks, and if I need to, I can hide my TC and not be too devastated.
You predicted the hussars there apparently because you're shipping the pikes right now.
If you go by his military buildings, I believe I sent my envoy back. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, I think maybe the envoy might have caught it like a sliver of the huss coming through. So I think, yeah. So this is actually I think, yeah. Pause it here because I think well, you can't go back in the recorded game, but I think I had some skirmishers queued at the barracks, and they were going to pop out. I think I canceled them because I saw the hussar there.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the reason I did that is because my pikemen were still, I think, 15 or 20 seconds away from arriving, and I didn't want him to see my skirmishers there pop out without anything to defend them. So that, I think, was a pretty big decision in terms of how the first fight will go in this game.
Absolutely. So I remember when I played my first Dutch games, I always like this. You think like, well, I got skirms in H2, that's really good, but then you get like a 3 hussar shipment from an enemy, or even like a French player or something, just training
Building
5
of them. Yeah.
And then you have your skirms in your base, you just get wrecked by cavalry because they can't do anything against that. So that's a really big problem, but you really have a good timing here with the 8 skirms on the way, also Minutemen on the way, and the 3 skirms in build right now.
8 pikes, yeah. Also quick question. So far you only have used the market for researching hunting dogs, right? You haven't done any other tags.
Yeah, that's correct. And sometimes trying to go for steel traps too early can delay one of your banks, so I don't typically do that. What I use my market for is it's nice to, if you need to buy wood for a house, or if you need to buy food or buy or sell food or coin for Minutemen, and it just gives you a little bit of flexibility. And then later on, once you're getting up to H3, then you can get your steel traps in, and because generally the idea, you want to get to H3 pretty quick, because like you said, Dutch can have trouble against cavalry, so Reuters are really a good option. So you want to try to get to H3 as soon as you can, get those guys out, and you can often make your 5th, and if you only had 3 before aging up, your 4th and 5th banks off of 1,000 wood, and with the help of steel traps. So usually Dutch focuses on trying to get to H3, but in this situation, I needed to do something to defend. I couldn't just get up.
Right now you're sending 600 wood. Actually, if I remember correctly, will you... I'm not quite sure. It's possible that you shipment, not 100% sure. Or will you? No, I think they will go through.
Yeah, I think so.
So the plan for the 600 wood is probably to build some more military buildings, I guess?
I think I go... You can definitely get your stable up, and I think I do. I think that's what I go for. It's depending on how the game's going, right? Like, if you're feeling confident that you're holding and you can go H3 and get your... Because your skirmishers auto-upgrade, their stats automatically increase once you get to H3, so that's a nice boost. And then you can get Reuters, and then, kind of get, because Dutch can, with 5 banks, they can really, not even without a lot of trouble, they can support 3 military building production, which is like most civs can't do that early fortress. So that's a big benefit that they have. But also you got to have a feel for the game. Like in this game, this is New England. He has 3 TPs. He could very well get a 4th one and take Stagecoach. So you also don't want to like take all the time to age up, send like 1,000 wood, get your military massed up, and then hopefully he's not up to H3 and you can push his TP. So it's weighing your options. And I think in this game I stay H2 because I didn't want to give him too much time with the trade post line.
And also you already did some really good deals, so it's not like you have to get some really big units out. It's basically hold, and I mean Otto, even with 4 TPs, does have a hard time to out boom you, out eco you when you're playing Dutch and Area 4 banks running, right?
Yep, exactly.
So it's mostly playing safe in this situation here from you.
Yeah, because I feel like I didn't lose any villagers, or if I did, not many. And I do have 4 banks and feeling pretty good. So pikemen aren't the greatest, but they'll get the job done if you have them in the right position. And then Hussar are always pretty good. And if you can micro your skirmishers well, they can beat Janissaries pretty quickly too.
One thing I noticed, I'm not quite sure if that's true, if you would agree with me there, but at least from my experience, I'd say that in the DE, the trend is going towards more greedy, more economic play, and like it's going away from these all-in rushes for many civs. Would you agree with that, or is that? I would say
it's for me on the. I don't know if you guys ever played the EP, the ESOC patch. But, yeah, on that, I think that was already kind of the case where, at least, and especially the higher level players, it's usually you try to get away with as much greed as you can, and if you're able to get away with it, then you typically will be in a lead in the lead in the game. So, yeah, that's, and if other players are starting to pick that up, I don't know if that's because of DE or if that's kind of like. Well, because DE is very similar to EP and all the changes and balance and things like that, so it makes sense to me that that'd be the case.
Okay.
So now we have a big fight incoming here. So April with Ottoman is pushing in with a bunch of Janissaries and also quite an amount of Hussars that you already saw because he tried to raid you. So what was your thoughts on this? Were you pretty confident and happy because you're not retreating towards your town center or something?
Yeah, so I do have quite a bit of skirmishers here, and if you can split their fire into like 2 groups, like kind of drag box one side and shoot, and then if you have them in the control group, you can then after drag boxing half of them and shooting, you can then hit your control group. Like mine was 3, and then you can target that control group on another Janissary, and you can typically get like 2 Janissaries killed in one volley. So I think I got at least a couple of those splits done, and then with enough pikemen and 5 Huss and another 3 reinforcing Hussar, I felt like I could take this fight.
Yeah, I mean the skirmishers obviously are really good counters for Janissaries.
Yeah.
So
and that's actually, it's pretty important in this fight to try to utilize them and not overkill. You know, you don't want 20 skirmishers targeting 1 Janissary because then you kind of waste the value of their bonus damage.
Sure. Yeah. It's actually a thing that I'm like, just a couple of months I started to try to work on that and just use attack move in the end, and it's actually one of the things.
Yeah, attack move can be good, especially if the units that you want to attack are on the front line. Like if his Hussar are behind his Janissaries, attack move can split fire relatively well, and target target the correct units. But if his Hussar are in front, then you want to directly right click the Janissaries. Otherwise, they're going to be attacking the Hussar, and Hussar have the ranged resistance.
Yeah, they will tank all the damage that you necessarily need to deal against the Janissaries. But that fight appears to have been pretty decisive because April resigned here. Yeah, so what was your overall thought of the game? Were you happy with what happened? Were there any errors that you missed? Even like watching the playback now?
Yeah, I was quite happy when I won this game, and because he is a good player, and I felt like this at this point in my experience with Dutch, I felt like this was a tough matchup. So I found that fighting H2 against them is much preferred. I would way rather have them push an H2 than to have to face their H3 push. But yeah, if you defend well and you get some skirmishers out and you don't lose them to Hussar and you can get some pikes to defend, your bank and if you have 4 banks up, being in having all your villas in the TC really is not that big of a deal if you have 4 banks, because they gather at I believe it's typically estimated about the rate of like 4 villagers. So even if you have all your villagers in the TC and you somehow were able to get your 4 banks up and still be in the game, and you still have like 16 villagers gathering while you're completely idled, which is pretty valuable.
So we also see that here in the timeline. So when just opening up the timeline here, the resource timeline, and we actually see that you out-boomed him by a fair amount.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he ever got Stagecoach upgrade, but even with 4 TPs, he can really send in all the resource crates, which would be reflected on the graph too.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the map. I think he got the Stagecoach upgrade. I mean, he got all 4 TPs. I believe that he also got the Stagecoach. Yeah, he got.
Yeah, it looks like it.
I think he put I think he put the trade post on food, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But yeah, so this went actually pretty well. Let's probably have a look at the military statistic as well. I think the 2 engagements you had were both pretty good for you. Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, and another little tip for those fights is you may have noticed I popped out my villagers a few times, and early on I got the Great Coats upgrade, which is very, very valuable, especially if you. There's a couple things that are important when you're getting into your TC and you're like kind of planning that you're going to pop out with maybe some pikemen, some minutemen, skirmishers. You want to make sure you have the food for Greatcoats and the food for Minutemen, because you need to time those things all together for the best effect. So if you can gather that food beforehand, or if you can, with the bank's gold generation, if you can buy some of that food so that you have it all at the same time, it's pretty important.
So what Greatcoat in the end allows you to do is pop out your villagers and actually tank some of that damage, and also make it harder to really focus on your units, right? So your military units that pop out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the first things I did when my pikeman shipment arrived, is I popped out the villagers, because a lot of players, we're talking about micro earlier, a lot of players do use attack move, and with the same concept. If I have villagers that pop out in front, closer to his Janissaries than my pikemen are, and he attack moves, he's going to attack move on the villager rather than the pikeman. And I want to keep the pikemen alive. I only have 8 of them for that time being, so I want to keep them alive as long as I can. So that's the main reason why I did that, is to block the fire from the Janissaries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the villagers, if you see, there's 10 hand attacks. So if you can get them in melee on some of your enemy's units, they do a good amount of damage too.
Yeah, it's like per hit, it's like 5 villagers hitting 1 unit, it's 50 hit points down. So that's can make a change.
Actually, it's more.
Select a skirmisher. I'm curious what their hand attack is. Actually,
it's less. I think it's around 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. So there you go.
So yeah, actually the villagers got more hand attack than the pikes, and comparable life points or hit points.
Skirms.
No. Pikes.
Pikes, really?
Yes, pikes got around 5 or something.
They have that big multiplayer.
Yeah, exactly. They've got a big multiplayer against Cav, but their hand attack is actually quite low. Okay, probably all of them are dead.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Doesn't matter. Okay.
So there was
just one more thing to clarify. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You said that you'd rather fight against Ottomans in H2 than in H3. This is because of the missing cannon shipment or Falconet shipment for the Dutch, right? Because you cannot really counter enemy Falconets.
Yeah, I found that it's very difficult for Dutch one, to get up to age 3 in time to find, because you're basically scrambling to find a way to deal with the Falconets, because they can take your banks out, especially if your banks are in front of your base. Like I only one of my banks is in front of my TC here, and that was one of the ones I think I built later when I knew he was already going H2. So you kind of want to build everything behind your TC against Ottoman, at least initially, because if they go fast H3 and the Falconets are out there, they can outrange your TC if anything's in front of your TC. So your TC can do a lot of damage to the Falconet if they're in range, but if not, then they just have free reign to take everything out.
Actually, a really good point. And I can do some foreshadowing here, because I think we will have that Falconet discussion in the second game as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be a fast fortress game.
So
Alert.
I would just suggest we dive into the second saved game now and see how it works when dealing with a fast or semi-fast fortress.
Yeah, exactly. See you in a minute.
And here we are in the second replay. This time you're playing against France.
Yep. So again, scouting seems to be pretty important for Dutch, and that's going to be something I focus on here. Initial early game in the first card can be typically the same, but from there, around four minutes, you want to really see what your opponent's doing. But again, here I'm going to go for a market. I do get a small wood treasure at the beginning to help speed that along, or help me not have to gather as much wood for the house.
Yeah.
And same idea. You want to age up 15 villagers and get your market and hunting dogs as early as possible. It's not something you have to do, but sometimes I prefer to do that, especially if you have a wood treasure around at the beginning.
So coin treasures can also be kind of nice. You're playing against Samwise here. Map is Borneo, by the way. I think it's a terrible map. I don't know why it's in the rated map pool even.
Yeah, I've come to like it a little bit, because there are a decent amount of hunt patches and elephants. Coincidence, but yeah, if you have the elephants there, you have like at least enough hunt to sustain like some mid game battles and not have to like go onto berries or whatever. So I'm not like sold. I'm not like, it's not one of my favorite maps, but it's one I can deal with.
The elephants are really good. It's really 4,000 food on them, so like 1,000 each, but herds are usually 4 animals. Sorry, what would you want to say, Fred?
I wanted to say one thing I don't get on this map is why they split the trade route. I mean, you have like 2 different trade routes you have to upgrade separately, I believe. So you can only like get Stagecoach on 2 of them before you have to research it again. And that kind of feels weird to me, because you actually punish a player or like you're not rewarding him for map control. I mean, if you would be like, for example, and you have like strong map control, you want to take all 4 trade posts, and then you have to research Stagecoach 2 times. That's like kind of unfair. But yeah, just like my feelings on the map.
Yeah, so, and that could be because a lot of times TP Stagecoach can be like a counter to like somebody going really hard on water, and that kind of, you don't have that option because of I don't even think you can build the ones by his base, probably because they're too close to the town center, I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So at least one of them will be too close. So the deck looks a little bit different. You have another 700 food in here. You don't have the caravels, even though it's a water map.
Yeah, so I didn't go for the water deck that I have. So because I have a couple extra slots in H2, I had the food in there, which I think recently I've switched out for advanced arsenal. For if there's like, some prolonged H3 or maybe H4, I can send that and get the extra upgrades on the skirmishers. So,
and the Reuters as well.
Yeah, and so I think I prefer that at this point.
Okay.
But 700 food can be helpful. Like if you somehow find yourself in a situation where you really want to get up to H3, and you've already gathered a lot of coin, sometimes in certain circumstances, it can be better to send 700 food rather than 700 coin.
Okay.
Maybe pause for a second, and you can tell us in the meantime what your thoughts were on your scouting intel and what your game plan is from here on.
And also, like, facing France in general, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are important to scout for. And at this point, it's maybe a little bit early for scouting because France is potentially still gathering or just clicking up now. But what you can do around this time or a little bit later is look at his villager distribution. If he's got a lot of villagers on wood, maybe he's just gathering for steel traps upon age up, or maybe you can also check the TP slot, see if he's going for a second TP in Stagecoach. And then when you get a little bit further, when you know he's like done his gathering for the market upgrades, and then he's distributing for military production, you can look at his gold mine, see if he's got a lot of CDB on coin. That's most likely he's going to make some Hussar. If he only has 4 or 5 on coin, he's probably going to make some musketeers. So those are a couple things you want to look for in transition.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What would be more scary for you in this case?
The most scary would probably be a forward base where he actually does both and does the classic 𝐁𝐚𝐧𝐤𝐬 build where you send 700 wood and then you can drop both military buildings right away. And if you're lucky and you get some good treasures, you can get both 5 Hussar and 5 musketeers. Because like we were talking about last game, it's tough for Dutch to deal with Hussar, especially early, and they really don't want to use a shipment on 8 pikes that early. So that is one thing that I think would be one of the more difficult things for Dutch to defend.
So what you see here now is like a lot of villagers on coin actually.
Yeah. So right there, if you play France, and you have just by looking at that, okay, that's too many villagers if you're going to make musketeers, and that's probably too many if you're going to go both musketeer and Hussar, because you want maybe 1 or 2 less to have a perfect distribution to get like the 5 and 5 batch. So at this point, my explorer's also been looking around the middle of the map to see if he forward based. And then just kind of being active on the map, because at this point I really don't know what he's doing. He hasn't even taken the second trade post, so I'm still trying to distribute my villagers for the banks. And kind of the rule that I've been going by is if I don't see anything, then I can make banks, and then 700 wood's coming in, so I can kind of react off of that. If he's not making any military, I can make more banks, a 5th bank even. And if he is making military, then I can drop buildings down really quick. And another tip to tell if your opponent is going to make military in H2 is count his houses. If you see just one house, that means he doesn't need a lot of population space. And typically you can rely on that because he could build houses in different places around the map, but generally players do it around their town center. So that's one thing that
you just don't want to spend your time walking around, like, so.
Yeah. So that's another thing is it's maybe a little risky, especially with Dutch, because if you invest in an extra bank, and you think he's not making military, but then he is, then you get punished more. It's harder for you to make up for that because the wood that you need for a military building has already been spent into a bank. But then I see his 700 wood come in, and now I see stable, and so at this point I'm thinking, okay, so he went 700 wood. He got his second TP now. He's probably doing like a 5 cavalry stagecoach semi-FF. And so then I just kind of play off of that, keep scouting. And I got my stable to do some harassing while I try to get up to H3.
Yeah.
And my 4th bank is coming out.
Right, so the Bankwagon is also arriving as third shipment in this game, and you actually, like, you queued Hussars pretty much the same time than he did, so he won't out-pop you on cavalry mass, at least if he's not sending the 3 cavalry. I'm not even sure if he has them in the deck. Yes, okay.
Yes, but I think we already established that he's probably going for a semi-FF. Okay, so your thoughts here are, okay, if he goes for the semi-FF, you probably have to do the same in order to build Rotor, how you pronounce them in English? Rotor? God lord.
Reuter. I think it's
Reuters.
Reuters.
Yeah, thank you.
Not sure exactly the correct pronunciation, but that's what I say.
I mean, it's not an
Reuters,
English name, right? So
no, it's not English name, but that doesn't matter. But you want to go for goons in order to counter his hussars, and you're also probably going to need them against the falconets. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in my experience, because mostly in the past I played a lot of French and German, and what I've experienced is that if you get to H3, if you're playing against Dutch and they get to H3 and you both get to H3 around the same time, with around like nobody's taking excess damage, then typically that seems pretty good for Dutch, because then they can make Reuters, which are, I think, more cost efficient, and I think feels like they're more easily massable. And in that situation, then like, what does French do? Because then you have like the same units, but I think Reuters maybe are a little bit better or more efficient. So Dutch seems like they're in a good position if they can get to that point.
Oh, you actually got the will. Good done.
I mean, it's like Reuters, especially like they're more pop efficient, right? So like 2 Reuters take up the same pop space as 1 Dragoon, but 1 Dragoon will be worse. But you also have a push in the base right here, and your H-up hasn't been queued yet.
So if you noticed, I found that barracks quite late.
Yes.
So I had to react off of that, and now at that point I'm like, okay, let me try to raid, let me try to age up real quick. And if you, like you said, I didn't have the food to age up, so I had some coin in bank, and I bought a little bit of food and was able to click up with that. So I'm actually lose a couple villas here while I'm also multitasking, trying to get my hussar out of there, because he had trapped them with his own hussar, and I was actually kind of a little bit lucky to get out of there with 4 of them. So
yeah, just sacrificed one of them in order to get the others out, right?
Yeah, and I lost a couple villas there unnecessarily, so I was a little bit frustrated at this point with my micro in base.
Yeah.
But I am getting up, and he looked like he made quite a few units in H2, so I'm still, I'm okay. I realize like it's not over. I do have like some time to try to get an H3 advantage. So, and then what I've found is that with Dutch, there's so many good uses to the 1000 wood in H3. If you can send that as the first card in H3, and you don't have to, like, you're not in like crazy defend mode, like you can safely do it, comfortably do it, and it's usually a good decision. So off of that, you can throw down your 5th bank, and you can get steel traps. You can throw down, what I usually do is 2 barracks. You can even go 2 barracks, and then, or if you started with barracks, you can basically get to 3 or 4 military buildings, and then if you send 1,000 coin after that, you can typically support those military buildings without any trouble.
Yeah, you already have 4 banks running as well, so... But like, he's also retreating now, he's not pushing anymore, he knows Reuters and Q and Hussars won't be able to snap out anymore or kill off any more villagers, and also he aged up, so I guess that's what you were expecting anyway.
Yeah. So that was, that's a pretty good age up time for him with the amount of pressure and the units that he made. So, it's still a really close, really tight game, and like I said, with the shipments, at this point, my plan is to kind of just really like get a huge mass off of the crate shipments, and usually French will be with like 1 barracks, 1 stable. Sometimes they'll add another barracks, but if you can, sometimes it can be simplified in terms of just getting more military buildings. If you have more military buildings and you can actually support the production, then you're going to have more military units, right? So sometimes it's just a game like that where the longer you can sustain more military buildings and produce from them, then you're just going to have more military.
Right.
Well, also, it obviously matters how your engagements go.
Yeah.
You didn't have a big engagement in this game so far, but depending on how the engagements are going to go, well, you're behind or in the lead.
Yeah.
Okay, so far you built 2 additional barracks, I think a couple of houses, and
Steel
also your
traps.
5th bank. Yeah,
And
steel
steel
traps
traps.
are being researched. Yes, and the 5th bank is also up.
Yeah, so a lot of things occur when you get that 1,000 wood in, like you guys are kind of naming off right there. That's why I feel like it's such an important shipment for Dutch to be able to send.
Which is interesting
Yeah.
because I always feel like Dutch does have a big amount of coin available, but skirmishers obviously cost a lot of coin, and routers are also quite coin intensive.
Yeah.
So here the push comes. Bunch of skirmishers, some dragoons and hussars, and some musketeers even. It's very mixed.
I think it's the musketeers you train in H2.
Yeah,
just
right.
like the leftovers, so to speak. Okay, here you snapshotting some dragoons. I mean, you lost a house for that, so I'm not quite sure who made the better deal here, but I mean, you scared him away for now.
Yeah, and I'm also raiding at his base to. Oh, and this is in general. You can say this. When somebody's attacking you with their military, typically they're bringing all their units, unless they have units in production that are running to the fight. So you can, if you have some units that you don't feel like are useful in the major fight, then you can send them off on the side for a raid.
Actually, we will look at the villagers stats after the replay, because I know you killed off some villagers there, even though I haven't really had my eyes on the raid right down, and you lost your hussars as well against the dragoons, but
yeah,
it was worth it, I think.
It's not the greatest to lose the huss there, but I think I did get 1 or 2 vills.
Yeah,
so, lost 2 there as well.
Yeah, and I kind of anticipate that this is going to be like a 𝐄𝐮𝐬𝐽 military composition. So Hussar, they're not super useful in that. So like sending him off for a raid is a decent option.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you wouldn't have needed them in the fight because they run into the enemies and are killed off by dragoons anyways, right? But okay, sorry.
Yeah, and like you pointed out, he has musketeers there as well.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, you shipped infantry combat. Is that correct? Yes, you shipped infantry combat.
Yeah, and that's another. It continues the trend of being extremely greedy in this with my H3 card order, like 1,000 wood, 1,000 coin. That's the greediest start you can have, and then shipping an upgrade is even more greedy. So like that's basically saying like I have the military that I need to defend and protect my villagers and my base, and I'm just gonna get more advantages over you, because that's a pretty good upgrade, and it's something that French doesn't even have access to. The only way they can match that is to send 2 cards, one that upgrades their skirmishers attack, and one that upgrades their skirmishers and villager HP.
Yeah. Could you pause the game for a second? I just wanted to have a little comparison of what the French player has right now versus what the soldier is having, just to see what he's up against. Maybe disable the fog of war for a second.
So we have 23 skirms here, another 8 up here, and 22 routers against.
You have to switch to the.
Yeah, I know this is always very confusing. So 28 skirmishers and 11 dragoons. You're really ahead in terms of military count.
Yeah, and you can see he's putting down his second stable now, and it looks like he does have 2 barracks. So we're pretty even on military production facilities. So
yeah, there's the 2 racks here, as you said, stable going up here. Cavalry takes longer to get trained, so having a second stable is actually a really necessary thing if you focus on dragoons or hussars, and you actually only have 1 stable so far.
Right. I mean, that's always an option for French players.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's continue. So I saw that you also researched the Great Coat and also placer mines.
Great Coats. Great Coats is an upgrade that at a certain point in the game, you just might as well get it because it's so valuable. It's cost less than a villager, and if it saves one villager, then it's already paid off.
Yeah.
So at like if a point then where you have like 500 food in the bank and you don't need it immediately, you might as well just get the upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
So the greed continues here. Cavalry
exactly.
combat coming in.
Greed continues.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. If you can sense the game, like how the game's going, and you have a good feel for what you can get away with. It's kind of the conversation we had, I think, in between games is like how the meta for you guys, you're seeing that it's going towards like getting it going as greedy as possible. Yeah, and that's kind of, you know, doing in the same way there is just getting away with what you can and getting other advantages on top of what advantages you feel you currently have.
So what you already said, what you are really afraid of in terms of fortress play is the Falconet shipment. And if I'm not mistaken, it should arrive. Yeah, it's there for the French
moment.
player. Of course, Dutch doesn't have access to 2 Falconets in Third Age, and it's a really good card for civs that have it.
Yeah, so the main fear of that shipment is early in Fortress, like under the 10-minute mark, where it, as you can see, Dutch is in a pretty good. I'm in a pretty good spot here, but it did take quite a bit of time to get there. Like sending 1,000 wood for a bunch of buildings and upgrades, steel traps, banks, multiple military buildings, houses, and then sending 1,000 coin right after that. That takes some time to kick in, and then upgrades after that. So early on in Fortress, when the Falconets are there, before you can do that stuff and get away with it, it's difficult to deal with. But at this point, I have a lot of military, and I have upgrades on all my military units, upgrade cards. And so at this point, if it depends, you gotta feel it out again. If you can safely just go and send your units in and tank some of the enemy like skirmishers while doing it, it can be worth it. But you know, you don't want to throw away too many units. It's a judgment call. But if you can get a good position where you can pick off the Falconets, it's usually a good option, even if you take somewhat bad trade.
So that's actually what you're trying here now. So we just saw you haven't really have more military because the Rutas don't count the same as dragoons, but you have way better units in terms of upgrades because of the cavalry and infantry combat. And you actually sniped off the 2 Falconets here without any problem.
Yep, and that's exactly. I did probably lose maybe 10 Reuters in that trade, but it's, you know, you'd rather do that, I think, than have to constantly get your skirmishers poked down by Falconets and potentially in the long term lose 20 skirmisher to those Falconets. So
one question, like, would you always prefer the skirm-goon combination, or like in Dutch case skirm-rutis, or would you also go maybe for an artillery foundry and build some artillery yourself?
Yeah, that's something I found as I played more games with Dutch, is that's often a good option. Like if your opponent is making a lot of infantry, and even in this case, Falconets would be a pretty decent option, especially if you have a good amount of Reuters to defend them, because Reuters have such good multipliers. I don't know if it's actually the case, but it feels like they can take down hand cavalry really quick. So and they actually, because of like how the unit looks and maybe the image or the art, it seems like you can hide Falconets and artillery in underneath them pretty well. So that helps too. And because there's so many of them, you know, there's more of them than typically a dragoon, right?
Yeah, and
so,
it looks like they can really
like
they really can stand close to each other. It looks really like a blob.
Yeah.
I think they stand closer to each other than having like 20 or 30 dragoons.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, right? Yeah. So and that's what you were saying earlier, the population difference. They cost 1 pop, so that you're gonna have more of them to make the equivalent like effectiveness. So you can micro them better and target hand cavalry, like split fire better because you have more units. But so it is an option, and I think a lot of times it's a good option. But in this case, I know I have upgrades on both of my units, the skirmisher and the Reuter. So I kind of stick with that, and I know really the only way he's going to get back in this is if he makes a big switch, most likely in terms of cuirassier and their elite hand cavalry, heavy cavalry. And so I just want to protect myself with having enough Reuters and don't put my skirmishers in a bad position. So, because I feel like with the upgrades that I have sent, in the score, looking at the score as an indicator, that I am in a good position. So I just want to make sure I stay in that position and not make risky moves.
Yeah, the score was pretty even for most parts of the game, but the last engagement, the last fight, where you had like your upgraded skirms and routers, actually switched it all. But we see that now coming in here, the cuirassiers from French.
Yep. So this is exactly what I was expecting, and I just wanted to try to keep good position and try to have enough anti-cav.
Also, what you're doing here, what's pretty important, I think, is the body blocking with your routers. So you try to prevent the cuirassiers from actually reaching your skirms, even though they might like kill a couple of your routers off, but that isn't as important as losing a lot of skirmishes to the cuirassiers, I believe.
Yeah. Yep. So that's exactly right. You want to protect your skirmishers, and even if you have to sacrifice the Reuters, you kind of want to do that just to keep the mass alive.
So we really see here, like, this engagement, this fight has been very, very decisive. So he had more military in terms of population, and I mean that's because of the falconets here. So eight population is soaked up by the falconets, and killing those off with the improved skirmishers and routers really gave you a really good military standing at this point here, because until then you are always underpopped.
Yeah, and that's you know, kind of the case with the upgrades. That's the effect they have, and that's why they're so important. If you can get away with sending them, because if you go to my deck, I don't even think, did I even send an H3 military shipment?
Yeah, you sent.
Or later on after the big fights when I had a lot of XP. Yeah, but
exactly.
But they came after every other like option in terms of economic and upgrades. So when you can get away with, when you're safe enough to do that, it's very beneficial. Like, because a lot of times with other civs, you're typically sending unit shipments as one of your first shipments. You want to be aggressive and push, and that's kind of what they do. And I think that's probably what he did. But if I'm able to match that just with sheer production, and then send upgrades, it's like, you know, it's a big boost for you.
So he did have cavalry combat on his cuirassiers and dragoons, which makes sense for a French player. It's a really strong card for them as well. And he also sent like four unit shipments in H3, but no resource crates, and really good game.
Yeah. So again, the key typically against French is if you can match their ranged army and hold, then you're going to be in a good position. But you just have to watch out for a lot of times they want to make that hand cavalry switch and get cuirassiers on the field and try to get, like, you can easily get 8 of them, you know, from a batch of 5 and then the 3 from the shipment. And sometimes if they have 2 stables, they'll go for, what is that, 13.
13 then, yeah.
And so if you can, that's usually a tough timing to hold, and if you can withstand that, then you should I think be in the clear to win the game.
Yeah. So we actually see here, that's what I meant earlier, that the raid down in his base after the H-up was successful. So you killed off 1 villager, and I think you idled 4 or 5 of them that were gathering from a hunt.
Yeah.
Even though you lost your hussars there. You also got raided a bit as well, lost a couple of villages, but that's expected against France, especially when doing a faster fortress.
Yeah, and that's why I had said something in the chat, and I was a little frustrated while aging up, because a couple of those vills didn't need to die. They were like right by the TC, and I just wasn't paying attention or something. Yeah. But and another option for Dutch, and maybe even in this game, if there's not too many dragoons on the field, is Dutch can go for a hussar switch, a veteran hussar switch. They can start teching the vet hussar tech, and in the meantime, if they see a shipment's about to queue up, or they'll have one available, they can get that tech, then send 5 husks, and then queue another 5 husks in that stable, or if they have a second stable, queue from that one, and have a similar timing to the Cuirassier switch, where you can get, because veteran Hussar are pretty good, especially if you were able to already send cavalry combat. It's pretty similar in terms of functionality, and even stat-wise, it's not super different than a Cuirassier switch, so that can be really effective too.
I'm under the impression that playing Dutch is like not really taking the action yourself, but more reacting to what your opponent is doing. So you're giving up a bit of map control deliberately, and you're trying to just survive, build up your economy quite close to your town center, try to not lose too many villages, and only push out after, well, quite a long H2 or after a fast fortress, right?
Yeah, so they're kind of a scaling civ in that way, is if they can get away and they can survive like the early H2 or early H3, then they're gonna usually be in a good spot. But they're not like the scaling civs like Japan or India, where they have all these other units that scale just based on upgrades and time, and their economy grows like that. But there is a definite spike in in like mid H3, where they have 5 banks and 3 or 4 military buildings.
Okay. That was quite a lot of inspiration and some helpful tips for playing as Dutch. And I think now we're going to the recap of the strategies so everybody can try to reproduce what Soldier has shown here.
Yep. So giving a full rundown.
Yep. Exactly. All right, guys, welcome back to the third and last part of this video, a short rundown of the strategy with some bullet points and the deck on screen as always. Yeah, Soldier, you want to begin?
Yep, so like you have titled there, 4-bank build order. That's typically the goal for Dutch. Get away as much as you can with getting typically 4 banks, but not being too greedy. So we're gonna, for this build order, we can just kind of assume like, let's assume like a game versus French, where they're not like, you're not facing like a heavy rush like Aztec or Ottoman, and you're just kind of doing like a pretty general build order, and you're not like in a ton of under a ton of pressure. So yeah, you can. The first thing there, or the second thing, building a market. That's a preference. You can do that on DE right now. It's a 200 wood crate start, so you have that option. Otherwise, if it's only a 100 wood crate start, then you don't have that option. And then if you do have a coin or wood treasure around your base, it makes the market build order a lot easier. Otherwise, you can forego that and just save that 100 wood for getting that first bank in transition up a little bit quicker. So that's a preference thing there. And then of course you need to build a house. You put about 5 villagers on gold to queue up your settlers, and like you have there, basically get enough gold to queue up 12, where you have 12 population, and then you'll age up off of 15, which would be the 3 extra from the home city shipment. And yeah, switch everything over to food once you have those villagers queued up. Quartermaster age up, and like we went over in the game, gathering 350 food and wood for the first bank in transition. And once you have that, you can switch over to coin to gather for that villager production upon age up. If you leave any on food or wood, you want to prefer to leave them on food, because all the wood you're going to need for banks is going to come from your age up, or your 700 wood shipment, or your bank wagon. So you don't need to gather extra wood early in the game. So if anything, you gather more food, because that's going to be what you need to gather to build the banks. So sometimes you can leave 3 or 4 villagers on food, or even more if you don't need a bunch of coin to queue up that first settler, because typically you can queue that first settler off of gathering coin with settlers. But once you have the first bank up, that helps contribute to that, and you don't need as many villagers on coin to continue production of villagers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once you get into H2, I like to typically send 700 wood, and you'll have no villagers chopping trees at that point, because like I said, all the wood that you need for banks is going to come from that. And you're going to have everybody, almost all the villagers on food at that point, because you'll have at least one bank contributing to coin gathering. So you only need 3 or 4 villagers on coin. And so, yeah, you're going to go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to ask you what you're going to do next.
Yeah, so you get the first bank. So the goal again, right, is 4 banks, right? You get the first bank in transition. You're going to get the second bank from the 400 wood age up. And then when 700 wood comes in, you're probably not going to have the food yet. But you still want to gather up that wood and continue gathering food. Drop a third bank, and then you can drop a military building, a couple houses, and then soon after getting your third bank built, because they give you so much experience, you can pretty quickly queue up another shipment to ship the bank wagon, which would be the 4th bank.
Right, so that's like a lot of economic strength relatively early in the game, because each bank's worth 4 settlers, if I'm not mistaken. So that's like 16 settlers that you get by, I don't know, 6 minutes or something, 7 minutes.
Yeah, so doing the build a few times and writing down some information, I found that you can get 4 banks at around 6 minutes 25 seconds, and at the same time, with that 700 wood shipment building a military building, you can also typically get either 5 skirmishers or 5 hussar at that same time. So you can get about 5 military units, whichever one you prefer, and 4 banks around, let's say, 6 minutes 30 seconds. So that's a pretty good point, where if you're not under too much pressure and you don't have to idle your villagers into the TC, then you could have a really good economy really early and have a few units to either defend or raid or whatever for whatever's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. From this point onwards, we essentially have 2 options, right? So we can either stay in H2 and play a long, drawn-out H2 game like you did in the first game against Ottomans, or you can alternatively try to age up to the Fortress Age pretty fast and, benefit from your shipments there and the upgrades for your units, and also you are able to build routers. So I'd say that's probably depending on what your opponent is doing, right?
Yes, basically, I would say entirely. Ideally, you do want to get up to age 3, like we talked about in one of the games. You want to get up as soon as you can, so you can get the ranged cavalry and skirmisher composition, which Dutch does really well with because of the population cost of Reuters and the upgrade shipments that not all civs have the skirmisher or infantry combat upgrade in H3.
Okay, so when would you prefer staying in H2?
I would say that it's actually never a preference to stay in H2, but it's something that you have to do in certain circumstances. So if you feel like there's a lot of pressure, especially if the opponent has a lot of cavalry, then you're probably to keep if you started barracks and you have skirmishers on the field, to keep them alive, you're going to probably want to send pikemen. But if you did start stable, and if your opponent is doing like a stable semi-FF like you and doesn't have musketeers or infantry, then you can kind of just run around with your hussar like I did in that last game, cause some idle cause him to have to multitask, and just get away with sending 700 coin and aging up. So that's a good use for your hussar, is to just cause like some havoc, buy some time, keep your opponent out of your base, and get yourself up to the next age. So sometimes it's good to go stable if you can, but if your opponent has infantry like musketeers or pikemen, then that's typically not a good option, because then it's hard to get a barracks up. When it seems, if you can see from this, it seems Dutch, their wood shipments and allocation and the way they get wood, it's pretty structured and it's pretty defined, right? Like you don't just happen to have an extra 200 wood. at most points in the game. Like you purposely like have 0 wood, or you have, you know, whatever wood that you're about to use. So that's an important part, is picking the correct military building to make.
Okay, let's assume that the fast fortress is more or less the standard. So after the bank wagon, your next shipment for an FF is going to be 700 gold, right?
Yes, and it's useful to also have 700 food in your deck if you're not super confident in your macro, your economy management, because there are times like if you are a little bit belled up in the TC, or if you had some poor distribution of your villagers, that maybe you already have a lot of coin. So 700 food can, while it's not the best shipment in terms of villager seconds, because food gathers faster than coin and wood, it's not the best in that way, but it situationally it can be useful. So yeah, but typically you're going to go 700 coin.
Okay, assuming that the 700 coin is enough for the actual age up, then like you said, you usually try to build a stable, try to train some hussars, annoy the enemy a bit, try to get some distraction, get the time to actually age up, and then you usually click up with the exile prince or the fast age up. Is that correct, or is that?
Yeah, I think that's almost always the case. There's maybe some situational things. I would say it's like 90% of the time. I think Dutch has maybe a water map age up for a caravel or something like that, and 400 wood. I'm not sure if that's the case, but
I think so, yeah.
Almost all the time you want to go exile prince unless there's special circumstances.
All right. Okay. So after you age up, what are you going to usually do in age 3 then?
So age 3, kind of like we were talking about in that last game, you want to get away with as much greed as you possibly can. And if the idea is to essentially find a time where it's safe to send 1,000 wood and utilize that. Because you don't want to send 1,000 wood if you're getting pushed and you have 5 skirmishers, your opponent has 20 units. Like if you send 1,000 wood in that case, you're never going to be able to fully utilize it. You're most likely going to have to resign before you can even put it to use. So there are times where you can't send it right away, where you need to send maybe a Reuters shipment to defend like a Musk and Huss push, or if he's going mostly ranged infantry and you need some extra skirmishers, then that's fine. But the best way to try to win the game, I think, is to find the earliest point that you can safely send 1,000 wood, and then following that, if you still feel safe and you don't need military immediately, then I would try to send 1,000 coin as well.
Okay, so for another 1,000 wood, you would build another bank.
Yeah.
And anything else?
And you're you're gonna try to build your 5th bank. If you were not able to build 4 banks, but in this case, let's assume we did. You can add banks off of that. You can add military buildings. You can get steel traps, houses. There's a lot of things that you can use the wood for. So it's not too difficult to find ways to spend it. But yeah, typically you want to get your 2nd and 3rd military buildings. Based on his unit composition, if you think you need more cavalry, more Reuters, then you would add a 2nd stable. Otherwise, I would typically you add a 2nd barracks. So you have 2 barracks and 1 stable.
Right.
All right. Okay. As we established in the in the second game, you're trying to be as greedy as possible. So if you can, then you will also ship the infantry and cavalry upgrades.
Yep.
Assuming that you cannot be that greedy, you would send unit shipments instead.
Yeah, like I was saying, if you feel pressure and you need some reinforcements, then you go ahead and send them. But if you can get away with sending upgrades, that's always the long term. It's a benefit.
So what
that goes.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say that goes even further in H3. Like if there are situations where you're confident you're ahead in military, you can even send, rather than sending like an H3 skirmisher shipment, like 8 skirms, you can send the skirmisher attack or HP upgrade from H2. And that's getting maybe even more greedy, saying that you don't need any extra units, but you want to just keep buffing your units for the long term, the long game.
Yeah, and also what you're also motivated is sending 1,000 gold, right? Just to be able to train more units.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, that's a key too, is making sure that, again, you have enough. You're not being pressured too much, where you can gather the food to make those units off of that 1,000 coin. Yeah, it's greedy, and you want to make sure that you're safe enough to do that. So there is a point. Excuse me. Talking a lot here.
Yeah, we know the struggle.
There is a point where you're actually being at risk, putting yourself at a bit of risk with both of those shipments, because you're saying that you can hold off without military shipments for quite a while. So that can be a challenge.
Right. So that's basically what we saw in the game, right? Like, construct more military units and train them, and just build up a big mess and overrun the enemy. Would you say that this strategy is also aimed at being like completed in age 3 and ending the game at that age, or would you say, like, I mean, you're building up quite a strong eco in the early game, so you could also try to play it longer, do more eco stuff, maybe send the cards to be able to build more banks, and maybe even go into industrial age, get the factories and stuff like that. Would you say that is an option, or would you rather say we have that really strong timing in age 3 and we should end the game with that?
I think both are good options, and it depends on the matchup and what your opponent's doing. If you notice about the Dutch military and in the units that we're making here, they're ranged units, and they typically don't have high siege damage, right? So if you feel like your opponent's staying in his base and you attempt to poke in and take some shots and see what you can do, but he's just kind of backing off and you can't really effectively push into the buildings, then that's the case where, yeah, you can go either route of getting the church card and making the 2 extra banks, or you can go up to age 4, get some factories, maybe some heavy cannons, and go that route. But if you do foresee and you feel like there's going to be some fighting in age 3, and it's pretty safe to just keep making units, because even if your opponent goes to age 4, there's times where because you have so many military production facilities and your economy is rolling along so well, that you can just kind of just overrun even age 4 shipments with your mass, because Dutch can just kind of keep pumping out units, because they don't need a ton of like food for that. So when you have like a couple hunts left, maybe some bison, like that really goes a long way.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much into those insights. I think that's basically all about the strategy and the rundown in general.
Shall we have some closing comments maybe on what you're going to do if you have to stay in H2 for longer?
Sure. And actually, something you brought up made me think of a couple different ways you can go. Like when you're saying going to age 4, there are a couple important things about going to age 4, and it is really strong. Dutch does have some good timings in age 4, because they can, if they get up early, they can overrun the opponent with the church card, the 30 musketeers for 2,000 coin, which it seems like a lot, but if you age up to age 4 with the 1,000 coin politician, then it's only 1,000 coin, and that's really not all that much when you have 5 banks or even more. So you can do that, and you can time that with heavy cannons, and that is something that's typically, if it's especially early in the game, it's hard for your opponent to defend against.
Actually, that's very right. Yeah.
That's a nice option. It's fun to do too. It's flexible, because even going to age 4, you don't have to do that. You can send factories and just upgrade your units, but it's something that has a good timing. And then again, you said the church card for the extra banks in age 3. That's another potential option to go.
Yep.
All right. Maybe, like I said, maybe some closing notes on like what you would do if you have to stay in H2. Like you said, it's not a preference, like you don't want it, but if you have
sometimes, yeah. So a good shipment for flexibility, if you do have to stay in H2, is the 600 wood. And in the first game that we watched, I ended up just I built a stable off of it, and I made some houses, and I think I might have made some pikemen off of it too. So that's a good shipment you make sure. You definitely want to have 600 wood in your deck for that option. But even if you're not like making pikemen, or if you don't want to make a stable, you can use that for the 5th bank. So rather than that's kind of the two ways that you typically will see that 5th bank be made, is either from the 600 wood or from the 1000 wood. And it's fine to stay in H2. And there's an interesting thing here, because if you do send the 600 wood, sometimes you can get away with not having to send that 700 coin shipment. If you make an extra bank, you have that coin income a little bit more, and actually that's the time where if you do feel like you need another shipment to age up, sometimes it'll be the 700 food in that case, because if you do have 5 banks, well, that means you just spent 350 food on a bank, and you have more coin income. So then that's where when you get that shipment and you're looking at your deck and you're trying to decide which shipment to send, you'll often see like you'll have 400 coin or 500 coin and like 600 food or 400 food, something like that, depending on where your economy was. And at that point, that's when that 700 food gives you some flexibility too. But yeah, so if you're staying in H2, the 600 wood is very important to have. You can make a couple batches of pikes off of it. You can make a bank, and you can, of course, add houses and a stable for Hussar too. So a very important card for H2.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
One last question. What about the 2 additional cards that increase your bank limit, like the Bank of Amsterdam and the Bank of Rotterdam? Would you ever include them, or is that like too late game oriented?
Yeah, I think those are too late game, because there's not too many situations where you can afford to do that. And even if, when you do send those, you still have to spend the resources for an extra bank. So it's not the best benefit. I find that there's typically cards in other ages that are better. Like if you're in H2, you can add like Advanced Arsenal, which gives you upgrades for your skirmishers and other units. Or in H3, we have I think we're maxed out in shipments typically in H3, and we send a lot of upgrades. There's a lot of things that you want to send in H3, and then H4, I believe it's the Tulip card, which boosts banks gather rate, and then you want to typically have heavy cannons, your factories, and then I like to have at least 1 military shipment. Maybe I think there's like I don't know how many Reuters it is. I feel like it's 17 or 19, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's I like to have cards like that rather than those extra.
17 it is, by the way.
Yeah. So those cards, while they sound like a good idea or maybe nice to like add another bank, I don't think has the best payoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I always I would have really enjoyed them to be in H3 and then also ship a bank wagon, like increase the bank limit and ship a bank wagon. I think that would be a really interesting switch up, because it's actually makes you think about including it in Fortress. And especially in H1, you will never in H1 need to increase your bank limit. So I never really understood those cards anyway. But for a really late game play, of course, they are necessary.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that is a good point. I hadn't thought about it, but if a bank wagon came with that would make it for quite a good H3 shipment, I think.
Yeah, because it's not like 1,000 resources like the crates, but you get a building with it, and it increases your. Might be, well, we'll see. Maybe they will change it up in future updates. We will see. It's not our decision to make.
We'll bring it straight up to the devs, right to the top.
Yeah, right. Let's put it onto the forums.
Yeah, probably contact interjection about that. Okay. Thank you very, very much for giving us this incredibly detailed rundown of your thoughts on the Dutch, and also presenting the strategy today. We're very grateful for having you here, and wish you all the best. And
thank you. And I'm glad you guys came to me, and I'm glad I could help out. So thanks for inviting me.
You're absolutely welcome. One important thing to say, where can people check out more of the awesome gameplay stuff that you do?
Oh, yep, definitely. So I stream pretty frequently nowadays. So my Twitch channel is twitch.tv/soldier_AOE.
Right.
We're definitely going to include that in the video description as well.
Sure thing. Also, there's a bunch of gameplay videos of Soldier out there on YouTube, which you can look up. If I'm not mistaken, they are also featured on Age of Streaming frequently.
Yep.
And yeah, might spot him in future tournaments and all that. Wouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, let me see your soldier hypes in the chat.
Exactly. So yeah, thank you
All right.
very much for joining us. Make sure to follow Soldier wherever possible. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yep, thank you guys again. Appreciate inviting me and had fun doing this for you guys.
That's great. Also, thank you guys for watching, of course.
Obviously, and also hope to hear you in future videos, maybe future strategy videos. Thanks for your support and hear you around.
Goodbye.